Power. We were talking about this last week. Power for ministry. The power of God at work in the people of God to accomplish the purposes of God. How do we be a ministry that is empowered? How do we cultivate the power of God on this church so that we're not just laboring in the fleshly efforts of a group of people with a bunch of good ideas and cool personalities and good friendships? How do we cultivate the supernatural, divine work of the God of heaven in and through what we're doing? And last week what we talked about was that the power of God in the mission of God in the world right now is ultimately unleashed through the gospel. The gospel is that main instrument that God uses for the releasing of the Holy Spirit on the earth to bring souls to Him, to redeem His people, to adopt children into His family. John's gospel was written according to John's own testimony in chapter 20, verse 31. It was written so that we might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. It was written so that we might believe. Now, when a person believes that Jesus is the Christ, that's a miracle. Remember last week we looked at Thomas, and Thomas would not believe until he saw with his eyes. And then John says, well, actually Jesus says to Thomas, actually, there's a really cool thing that's going to happen in the world, Thomas. People are going to believe with the same belief that you have, having seen me with your eyes. They're going to believe, but they will have never seen me. And that's a miracle. The power of God at work in the world to create believers in Jesus Christ, even though we've never seen Him with our eyes. That's a miracle. I live for it. By the grace of God, I died for it. And so would many or all of you. Why? Because there's power at work in our lives. How was that power unleashed? These things were written so that you might believe. It happens through the writings. It happens through the gospel. The scriptural account of Jesus. Remember, Paul said to the Corinthians, I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling. My speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in a demonstration of the Spirit and of power. So Paul just preaches Christ crucified, and power shows up. That your faith might not rest in the wisdom of man, but in the power of God. If we want to be a church with the power of God unleashed, we have to be a church that centers on the gospel. That's how we cultivate the power of Christ at work in us and through us. Now, what I also said last week was that it's important to realize that our strategies that we utilize to do ministry are not in themselves the power of God for salvation, right? The gospel is the power of God for salvation. Our strategies are not the power of God for salvation. So if we meet on Sunday morning, or we meet on Sunday night, or we have small groups, or we do discipleship in this way, or we just do discipleship in that way, or we sit in rows, or we sit in a circle, none of that is the power of God for salvation. But does that mean that our strategies are completely unimportant? Is that the implication? Does it mean that strategies play no role in the cultivation of the power of God in our ministry? And I think the answer is no. They may not be the power of God for salvation, but I actually think that methods matter. I think that methods matter. And in fact, even though our methods and strategies are never the ultimate source of God's power, they're often the very, vehicles through which God chooses to move so powerfully in the work of gospel-centered ministry. Sometimes Jesus gives his people specific strategic things to do as individuals, as families, as churches. Some specific steps that he wants us to take, some specific strategies he wants us to employ. And what I want to suggest this morning is that when Jesus provides specific, strategic, mission directives, it's often followed by an unleashing of mission power, so that the gospel is effective in winning people to Christ. Sometimes Jesus will give us specific mission directives, and often what follows as we walk in obedience to those is mission power, so that the work of the gospel is effective in our ministry to bring people to Jesus. And I think that's what we see today in John chapter 21. Let me give you some context. We've been working through John's Gospel. We're now in the final chapter. We've been going through John's Gospel from the time we started this church, so like 2.5 years-ish. And we're now finally in the last chapter, and we have just witnessed the resurrection of Jesus, and then 2 appearances that Jesus made before his disciples. The first appearance was on Resurrection Day. That night, Jesus appears to 10 of his disciples, it seems. There's no Judas there. There's no Thomas there. And then there's, and then those 10 try to tell Thomas about what happened. And Thomas doesn't believe. Their ministry is ineffective to him. And then the following Sunday, which would have been last Sunday, Jesus appears again. This time to the 10 plus Thomas. And that's totally convincing to Thomas. Touch my hands, put your hand in my side, stop your unbelief, and you need to believe in me, Thomas. And Thomas's response is, my Lord and my God. And so those are the first 2 appearances. This week, Jesus appears again. And this is the scene that we opened with today. It's the scene that carries us through the rest of the book. So the rest of the book of John, you can imagine the context that we're going to introduce today. This scene of Jesus and the disciples in the sea, fishing on the seashore, etc. The passage that we're looking at today in particular is what I'm going to call a revelation sandwich. And what I mean by that is that in verse 1, we're told that what we're about to look at is a revelation. And then, as the top piece of bread. And then the bottom piece of bread is the other side of the sandwich. It says what we just looked at was a revelation of Jesus. So it's actually, just take a look at it. Verse 21, verse 1. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. And then the next 12 verses are all the revelation of Jesus at the Sea of Tiberias. The Sea of Tiberias, by the way, is up in the northern part of modern-day Israel, up in what was known as Galilee. Everything in recent days has been taking place down in Jerusalem, which is in the southern part of modern-day Israel. So the disciples have gone back up to Galilee, where they originally had their, that's where many of them were from. That's where the Sea of Galilee was. This is where Jesus called the disciples. We know that Nathanael is from Cana. So a lot of Jesus' ministry is up in this northern part. His life ends down in the southern part. Our scene today is back up in the north. They've left Jerusalem. The first 2 appearances were in Jerusalem. They've now left Jerusalem. They're up in Galilee. And the reason they're up in Galilee is because Jesus told them to go back up to Galilee, where they're going to see him again. Matthew 28, verse 10 says, Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. go tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. So that's why they're back up north. Jesus told them to go there, and they're going to see Jesus there. That's the top piece of bread. Sea of Tiberias, this whole sea is going to unfold. The bottom piece of bread is verse 14. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Okay, so the passage is about Jesus revealing himself to the disciples. He's going to show them something. He's going to teach. There's a lesson here for the disciples, something they need to learn about Jesus, something they need to see. What's the lesson? Well, it has something to do with fishing. So let's read verses 2 and 3. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, he's the guy who just proclaimed my Lord and my God back in verse 20, or in chapter 20. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, the author of the Gospel of John, and two others of his disciples were together. I don't know who they were. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, we'll come with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Now some scholars believe that the fact that these guys are going back to what they did before Jesus called them, and the fact that they are unsuccessful at it, means they're doing something wrong here. Some scholars would say that these guys have apostatized. They've turned back away from Jesus to their former way of life. They're going back to they're going back to the fisherman's life, and they've turned from Christ. It's actually a somewhat popular perspective. Is that a correct understanding of what's going on? Are Peter and the others on the run at this point? Is this a reversion to the pre-Jesus way of living? And I don't think there's any need to assume that. In fact, I think that's just wrong, frankly. I think that's not what's happening here at all. And I've got 4 reasons. I'm just going to walk through them because I want to understand what they're up to here. Number 1, there's nothing in the preceding passages where Jesus resurrects from the dead and appears to the disciples. There's no indication of anything other than joy-filled, glad-hearted faith in the resurrected Christ. Thomas just proclaimed, my Lord and my God. And so I think a sudden shift to all of them abandon that and go back to their former way of life, unless John clearly tells us that that's what's going on, I think there's no reason to think that that shift happened without John making any commentary on it. I think you're actually reading that into the text. I don't see anything in the text that tells us that's what's happening. That's the first reason that I don't think that that's the right perspective. Here's the second reason. Jesus himself told the disciples to go to Galilee where they would see him. And so, this is not flight. This is obedience. They're actually hoping for another sighting. That's why they're there. Thirdly, there is no clear, precise instructions for the disciples about what they ought to be doing next, other than go to Galilee, and you'll see me there. They don't get more clear instructions until Acts chapter 1, verse 4, where they're told to go back down to Jerusalem. So they're like, okay, so we're up in Galilee. What do we do? Well, they got to eat, and they got to make money. And so for them to bide their time with what they're familiar with is not an odd thing in my mind. I don't think there's any indication, even if they're unsuccessful in their night's fishing trip, I don't think there's any need to think that their heart is somehow in the wrong place or that there's some abandonment of Jesus. I mean, that's a pretty harsh thing to presume here. And then fourthly, I think we'll see momentarily that as soon as Jesus appears to them, they very eagerly go to him, which is not the kind of thing that a person would do if they're on the run. I mean, Jonah is a good example of what happens when somebody who's on the run is being tracked down by God. They just try to keep running. Peter, like a madman, like races to Jesus and swims 100-yard freestyle. So they return to Galilee. They're waiting to see Jesus again. They're going fishing. They're spinning the wheels. They got no fish. Put yourself in the situation. How would you feel? You'd be very tired, probably exasperated, probably very discouraged. Like, fish in this lake. Been here all night. And then Jesus shows up, verse 4. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, which is just their way of saying, guys, children, do you have any fish? They answered him, no. He said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. So they cast it. And now, they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. So after an unsuccessful night of fishing, and fishing at night was the preferred time to do it so that you could bring your catch fresh in the morning to the market to sell it. Totally unsuccessful night of fishing. Jesus shows up. They don't know that it's him. He calls out from the shore. They're out in the boat about 100 yards out. He calls out from the shore and he asks a very fisherman type of question. Hey, you catching anything? Right? Those of you who have gone fishing are like, that's like, there's some compulsion inside of you. You walk by somebody and you want to know, like the fishing is good. You have any luck today? That's kind of the feel of the question. And he's like, they're like, no. And Jesus, well, he knows where the fish are. And so he tells them, we'll throw the net over the other side. And for some reason they do it. Now, at first glance, I think this is a little confusing because we're told they don't know that it's Jesus. So why would they do it? Right? Does that make sense? Why would they? If this guy's like, hey, throw your net on the other side of the boat, and they're like, okay, and they do it, but they didn't know it was Jesus, why did they listen to this guy who's way off, on the shore far away? And I think it's probably just as simple as like, well, imagine you've been fishing all day. And you're thinking, there's no fish in this lake. Like you get after you've been fishing all day and catching nothing. And somebody's like, hey, you got anything? And you're like, no. He's like, have you cast under that bank over there? And you're like, no. Cast over by the bank. And you're probably going to do it. I would. Either out of just exasperation or maybe just some faint glimmer of hope that there are actually fish. This stupidity. And so they do it. And when they do, they net like an entire school of fish. And with that catch, it clicks. For John first, John's a pretty perceptive guy. He's like, that's the Lord. As soon as that happens, it clicks. Look at verse 7. That disciple whom Jesus loved, which, for those of you who haven't been with us, is John, which we will see in 2 Sundays, in the last sermon in our series. That disciple whom Jesus loved, therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that, Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, or literally naked for work. He threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from land, but about 100 yards off. So the net full of fish gives it away. John recognizes that this is Jesus. He says to Peter, that guy on the shore is Jesus. Peter, who is fishing naked, I don't know, maybe that's a Galilean thing, throws some clothes on, because that's probably the decent thing to do before showing up on the shore with God. And so he swims to the shore, and the other disciples are like, we got to get in there too, but they got to kind of like finagle the net, and Peter's not there to help. And of course, Peter's like the big, strong fisherman guy, but he's gone, so thanks a lot, Peter. You get this sense that they're like trying to drag this thing into the shore, finagling it through the water. And then John gives us an account of what happens when they get to the shore. Verse 9. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. Okay, so this guy knows where the fish are, right? Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish. So the guy's ripped. He can single-handedly manhandle the thing and bring it on shore. Full of large fish, 153. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. Now, this was the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. The disciples have been fishing all night long. They're tired, they're worn out. They come to land, and there's a meal prepared for them. So that while they're preparing some more of the fish, they immediately are served by Jesus. He's caring for them, he's providing for them, and Peter is he jumps into the boat, muscles the net to shore. There's 153 fish. The disciples know that it's Jesus, but they're reluctant to scrutinize him on that. You get the sense that they're very confident that it's him, but you also get this weird, and this is kind of a weird thing here, you also get this sense that they're like, it's hard for them to swallow. I think the feeling is like, is it really you? Can this be? But they know that it's him. But it's so crazy that it's him. I mean, he's already showed them his hands and his side. And there's this part that's like, I know it's him, but I can't believe it's him. But they dare not ask him because they dare not have any sense of unbelief. Is it really you? It's just so incredible. And then once again, like he had so many times before, Jesus serves them. And then John says this was the third time he revealed himself. This is the third revelation of Jesus to these guys since his resurrection. It's a fish-related lesson. It's a fishing-related lesson. Jesus is revealing himself to the disciples. And what's the lesson? What's he showing them through this? I think that if we want to start to kind of understand what's going on here, you have to remember that at least three, and maybe more, but at least three of the men who are specifically named in this passage were called to follow Jesus with these words. Mark chapter 1. Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon, so there's Peter, and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men. You need to remember that these are the same guys. And then immediately they left their nets and followed him to become fishers of men. And going a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother. They're also named in this passage that we just read. Who were in their boat mending the nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him. So several of the disciples of Jesus were fishermen by trade, and one of the ways in which Jesus recruited these men into his mission was using the imagery of their own occupation in order to invite them into the larger kingdom purpose that he intended to use them for. Their identity of gathering fish from the sea is used as a parable, you might say, for this transcendent greater purpose that Jesus has for them, not to merely gather in people, or not to merely gather in fish, but to gather in people to the kingdom. That's the imagery that Jesus used to recruit them. Jesus has this way of taking things of everyday life and then using those things to illustrate his kingdom purposes. And to illustrate what he's calling people into when he invites them into the work of the kingdom. So he'll take something like a farmer scattering seed, and it lands on a hardened path. This is very familiar imagery to an agricultural society. He says, that's kind of like my words falling on a hardened heart and not bearing fruit. He does this kind of thing. He'll look out at a field of grain, and he'll say, you know, it's not that the harvest isn't ripe. The harvest is ready to be reaped. The problem is that we don't have workers for the harvest. He takes something familiar and he uses it to describe kingdom principles, and it uses it to describe what he's inviting people into. He'll take a situation where a woman is drawing water from a well. He'll say, you know what, there's a kind of water that if you drink it, you'll never be thirsty again. He's always doing this kind of scene, this kind of thing, and almost parenthetically for a second, let me just, and I'm going to come back to the fisherman. What would it look like today? How would he do that today? I was thinking about the people in our church body here. We've got physical trainers, for example. There's a kind of training. There's a kind of equipping. There's a kind of strengthening that people are in need of. Bodily training is of some value, but godliness is of value both in this life and in the life to come. This is a good illustration of this greater kingdom principle. We've got people who work in food, and Jesus would say, yes, food, filling hunger. There's a kind of hunger that people have that must be satisfied with something supreme. We've got people in the medical field, and Jesus would say there's a kind of healing that people are in need of. We've got people who are teachers, and Jesus would say there's a type of student that ought to be raised up. We've got people who are parents, and Jesus would say there's a type of investment in the next generation. He's always taking the things that we're very familiar with, and he's using them to illustrate the great kingdom purposes that he's inviting us into. And that doesn't mean that the things that we're doing, day-to-day tasks, aren't important. It means that our day-to-day tasks are filled with illustrations of kingdom principles that ought to be easy for us to grasp, because there's a kind of hunger, there's a kind of learning, there's a kind of satisfaction, there's a kind of healing that Jesus can offer that surpasses all other healings, all other satisfactions. Now let's go back to the fishermen. These guys were recruited to the purposes of the kingdom with their fisherman occupation as a parable of how their lives are going to be used in the work of the kingdom. And here they are, getting ready to launch into what we know is going to be a life of ministry for these guys. And Jesus is going to prepare them for this kingdom activity with a lesson here, using fishing to illustrate what's to come. A lesson about ministry. A lesson about kingdom efforts. These guys will be fishers of men. He's going to send them to that work with this lesson in mind. Here's how it unfolds. They labor all night long in their task of fishing on their own. And it's a total failure. And then Jesus becomes a part of the equation. He knows where the fish are. He tells them precisely what to do. They obey him, and their efforts are no longer in vain at that point. 153 big fish. Nets don't even break. And even though they've done the fishing, Jesus gets the glory. They go to the shore, and there's fire already going. The food's already prepared. Jesus serves them. The whole interaction has this feel that this is perfectly clear to everybody on the shore that day that this resurrected Jesus is in total control of this whole fishing trip. This is what he does. He gets all the glory. This is his specialty. This catch was his doing. And John tells us that's a revelation to them of who Jesus is. So, what's the lesson? I think in a nutshell, here's the lesson. We will succeed in the kingdom agenda that Jesus has called us to, but not apart from Jesus. We will be fishers of men, and it will not be a mess. It will not be it might be a mess, but it will not be a waste of time, but not apart from Jesus. You see, these guys had an assignment, and we have an assignment. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. That mission will not fail. It is going to succeed, but not apart from Jesus. He knows where the fish are. He will tell us what to do. He will give us mission directives. For the disciples, this was a very important revelation for them as they're about to head into ministry. Because just as Jesus specifically instructed them to throw the net over the right side of the boat, Jesus is going to give them some very specific ministry directives. And he does in Acts chapter 1, verse 4. Here's what he tells them. He ordered them not to depart from Jerusalem. They're going to have to go back down to Jerusalem and stay there. But wait for the promise of the Father, which he said, you heard from me. For John baptized with water, but you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit not many days from now. So the specific instructions that Jesus gives to the disciples is go to Jerusalem and wait. They have clear ministry directives. I want you to throw the net over the right side of the boat. And so what do? They obey. They throw the net over the right side of the boat, so to speak. They go to Jerusalem. And they wait. Because that's what Jesus told them to do. They pray. And they wait. And they wait. They follow the mission directives. And then one day, mission power shows up on the day of Pentecost. The Spirit of God came. And up to that point, the disciples had caught no fish. Up to that point, their ministry efforts actually were fruitless. They couldn't even convince Thomas, one of the 12, to believe. But now, they've thrown the net over the right side of the boat. They've gone to Jerusalem. They waited. They followed the mission directive. And the result was that mission power is poured out. The Spirit pours out on the disciples. The nets are filled with fish. 3,000 people are baptized through Peter's preaching of the gospel on the day of Pentecost. mission directive was followed by mission power. Clear, specific instructions were obeyed, and the power of God was poured out, and the gospel did its work. The Holy Spirit brought in fish. We will succeed in the kingdom agenda that Jesus has called us to, but not apart from Jesus. We have to be obedient to mission directives. There must be an unleashing of mission power, and then we will have fish. Choice City is about to go through some pretty significant changes. Most of you are already aware of this. We're getting some clarity on our mission directives. Some clarity on what it is that the Lord is specifically calling us to in this season of life. And one of the things that we've realized in recent days, and that I've realized in recent days as the guy who's been leading this fishing trip, is that I've been largely focusing my efforts on trying to recruit people who are looking for a solid church. Let me translate that. I've been targeting Christians. I've been planting a church and designing a church and leading a fishing trip that's trying to catch Christians. And believe me, if you're a Christian, we want you. For what? To what end? And the answer is that in this season of a church's life, the goal is not to create a great church so that Christians who are looking for a great church might want to be a part of your great church. At this stage in a church's life, the objective is reach the unreached people. Reach the unchurched people. And Christians, we want you to help us in that work. And that's what we're going to be targeting. We've got some clear ministry directives that Jesus is providing for us. We've been trying to be a church that's more, mature than we really are. We're just not at the stage where we can provide all of the things that a healthy, mature church can provide for its people. We're just not there yet. The phase of life that we're in must focus on the reaching of the lost. And so we're going to very significantly aim our attention at that. And I'll give you more information about that in weeks to come. But Choice City Church is about to go through a pretty hard reset. We're going to replant the church. We're going to replant the church. Because we've received some mission directives. And of course my prayer, and I hope yours as well, is that it will be followed by mission power. And that we will catch some fish. Some big fish. Which I'm very excited about. So I think we are moving into a tremendous new season of the church's life. Details to come sometime in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. I would love to talk with you more about it if you've got questions and want to just kind of unpack some of what that would look like. But that's where we're headed. Mission directive followed by mission power equals fish. So let's go fishing. That was anticlimactic.